Welcome to the Frictionless Innkeeper podcast. Coming right up, fresh tips and insights from lodging professionals aimed at helping you improve your business. Our podcast is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest App, the digital concierge that helps your guests to live like locals. Learn how at frictionlessguest.com. Mr. Steve Short, how are you?
Doing well, Matt. How's life in Spain, right? Do people know that you live in Spain? Are we allowed to say that? Or is it, you want to remain incognito?
No, it's totally fine. Everybody knows everybody I work with, so it's all above board. No, so I appreciate it. And, living in Spain is all about work-life balance. And how are you at work-life balance, Mr. Steve Short?
I try, man. I try, but I don't know. My wife and family might have a different perspective, but it's pretty good. We got a pretty decent work-life balance. I don't know if that's true with the innkeeping world, or at least some portion of it, though. And that's what our podcast is about, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this next interview is with Rebecca Gallagher, and she's the founder of hozperity. So she's a consultant that really focuses on offering systems and advice to really simplify innkeepers' operations to hopefully improve profitability and really bring balance. And I love the name because it's all about enjoying financial and personal prosperity, thus the name hozperity, which I think is a very clever branding there on her part.
Definitely. And it's cool to talk with her because, a lot of times I love talking to so many different people in the industry, whether it's innkeepers or vendors, kind of like, Frictionless or the PMS systems, all these different places. This one is definitely for the innkeepers and, a hands-on kind of, I guess, realistic or reality check or whatever, and something that can improve their life pretty quickly if they give it a listen and listen to Rebecca's suggestions. It's a very hands-on, practical sort of interview and, podcast, in my opinion.
Yeah. 100%.
Actionable, right?
Actionable to help, get that work-life balance that frankly we all need. So with that, we hope you all enjoy this Frictionless Innkeeper podcast interview with Rebecca Gallagher, the founder of hozperity. And Rebecca, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you. Steve Short, how are you?
I'm doing well, Matt. How are you?
Doing great, my friend.
Got 2 words for you, by the way. Dry cleaner. Sorry, inside joke because of his shirt.
Anyway. Yeah, nobody can see, but we're on video right now. I know this is audio, but I have a shirt that's very wrinkled. So Steve's giving me a hard time about that. So yes, I'm starting the new trend over here of wrinkled shirts. So I don't know.
But it's okay because you're in a much later time zone and it's early in the evening there, right?
It is. That's correct. That is correct.
Rebecca, thanks for joining. We appreciate it.
Awesome.
So glad to be here.
Rebecca, it's great to have you. And let's actually go ahead and kick it off. If you don't mind, us tell us about your background and how that kind of evolved into the creation of hozperity.
Yeah. So I am kind of an accidental innkeeper. I was living my life in the corporate world. I was in corporate marketing in the oil industry in Houston, Texas. But my husband and I were both from the Northeast. And at some point in our life, we just decided we wanted to get back home to our old friends and families. And we started looking for places to move. And we were both suckers for old buildings. I was definitely always a fixer-upper. And we came across a historic property that was built in 1763 that was about to go into foreclosure. It had been a select registry bed and breakfast. So, it had good bones.
Wow. Yeah.
And at that point, I had left the oil industry and I was a stay-at-home mom. So by buying this property, which was, again, fixer-upper, love that, nice challenge, I was able to get back into the workforce and still be a stay-at-home mom. So it was kind of exciting. We put it in offer. It got accepted. I think it was maybe a 1.5 month turnaround before we were moving from Texas up to Ephrata, Pennsylvania. And I owned that B&B when we bought it, like I said, it was about to go into foreclosure. There were squirrels living in the attic. There was a lot of
Really?
deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance is the most hysterical phrase. And we took it from that condition over the course of 15 years we owned it. And the last 3 years we owned it, it was voted best bed and breakfast in Lancaster County.
That's
So yeah,
awesome.
it was a lot of fun. It evolved over those years. It started out as a 7-room inn. It ended up as a 9-room inn with an on-site restaurant and wine bar. So we were always, it gave us the opportunity to grow with the business. I think had I been thrown into that business fresh, at year one, it probably would have overwhelmed me, but I was able to grow personally and professionally and spot opportunities, spot deficits, spot needs in the marketplace, and it all ended up working out for us. It was an absolutely fantastic ride.
So I'm always curious, and I'm very familiar with Lancaster County because of where I live, which is, between Baltimore and DC. And first off, what year did you buy your place?
We bought it. That's going to be a telling year, 2009. So
2009. Okay.
It was a tough economy in the Northeast, but it was booming in Texas. So we were able to sell our house in a month for asking price. And we bought the inn at a very discounted price because of the condition. Of course, we put quite a bit of money into it over the years. So from 2009 to last year, we sold it in February of 24.
And what's the name?
It's the historic Smithton Inn.
Smithton.
In Ephrata, Pennsylvania.
That sounds really familiar. Like, I wonder if we stayed there or considered staying there because, my wife and I are big bed and breakfast people, but the connection up there was kids, going up like for the Santa train, that sort of thing or whatever. But Ephrata as well, isn't that where, I might be getting this mixed up, but isn't that where there's a historical commune kind of what is that called?
The Ephrata Cloister.
Okay, we checked that out. That was very cool. That was
so you were a stone's throw from my inn. If you were at the cloister, we could have hung for lunch.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I don't want to go too much off on the historic tangent that I love, but anyway, I just find it interesting that this was a select registry property that had gone downhill. I mean, you hate to see any property go downhill, but I mean, if it was select registry, it was not only an incredible property, it was well managed, right?
Right.
So obviously there's some kind of a story there, but anyway.
Honestly, it leads into probably what we'll end up talking about, which is in this case, it was a husband and wife team, and the B&B itself and the maintenance of it were the husband's vision, and then the wife was the innkeeper, and he became ill. And he had dementia at some point. And so all of the things that he did just stopped being done. And that's where you get that deferred maintenance. So, having that, if someone in the business were to fall ill or have something happen, how are you going to have a backup to keep running the property to the standard it's meant to be run to?
That's a great point. Let's get into what hozperity is all about and segue into this challenge, or how you improve, I guess, the life of the innkeeper now and also to be prepared.
Well, as in case you didn't figure it out, hozperity is hospitality plus prosperity. So it's not just being a hospitable innkeeper and being in the hospitality business, but it's being able to do so in a way that you as a business owner can enjoy the fruit of your labor. We all work really, really hard. And is our business set up? We all focus on profit and we all really focus on taking care of guests. But I think taking care of ourselves is sometimes the thing that gets put to the back burner, sometimes for too long. Sometimes you can get away with it, for short bursts. But when I left being an innkeeper, when we sold our inn and I was looking for what Rebecca 3.0 was going to look like, I love this business. I loved being an innkeeper. I loved every aspect of it. And so how could I help people enter this field but also enjoy it. Maybe miss some of the pitfalls that I had, learn from a few of the mistakes that I either did myself or that I see others doing. And so my focus as a hospitality consultant and a coach is really toward the operational side of things, where we can be setting up systems and procedures that also take into account not just the guest, not just profit, but you as well.
That's cool. Now, you talk about the work-life balance thing. So what's kind of the core concern there? Or, I mean, everybody wants work-life balance, right? But for innkeepers, what do you see as kind of the pitfalls or what the challenges are based upon, having lived it firsthand, but talking to other innkeepers and, how you kind of help with that to help get them in line with work-life balance, but also be profitable, I guess, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, and there can be a lot of barriers to it, right? It's some of it can be that your property is really small and you don't think you have the money to do it. That if you have a 4 guest room property, maybe it is difficult to either employ systems or employ people to try and free up some of your time. And I think this is shifting in the industry. If you think of the traditional innkeepers, you often think of elderly or older people. I think that's changing. I think there's a lot more young people entering this sector. And for those, there's a lot of great technology out there that can help free up your time. There's a lot of team checklist type apps where you can oversee your housekeepers without having to be there constantly. There's things like the Frictionless Guest App where you can be providing guest concierge service without having to sit there and make that speech to 9 different guests each morning, that they can be empowered to discover, unique experiences on their own. There's a lot of things. And then the third aspect would be just staffing and trying to either have temporary staff that could be available for you to go out of town or go out to dinner, or, full-time staff that you can employ a part-time or, assistant innkeeper, somebody that can buy you that opportunity to go out to dinner with your friends or have a dinner party, every once in a while.
Why is this such a big issue? Why aren't they leveraging this? I mean, I guess part of the answer is they don't know how, so they need to engage with someone like you. But I guess, is there a motivational factor here?
It's probably some combination. I'm going to be funny about this, but ego. Nobody can
Okay.
possibly do it as good as me. Or fear.
Okay.
I think fear is probably the bigger one. And it's true. The downsides could be huge, right? If you have someone come in that ends up like, wow, I didn't know they were drunk, and yet they fell down the stairs and hurt themselves, and now I have a workman's comp claim, or they treated my guests badly, or who knew you could burn that breakfast dish, And then, with TripAdvisor and all the review sites out there, if something goes wrong, it can be violently wrong. And so I think fear is probably the biggest. But what I would suggest is that any obstacle can be overcome if you're motivated to overcome it. Like, how bad do you want to go on vacation? And then it's up to you to find people, whether it's, if it's an interim innkeeper, for instance. Let's forget about staffing. But interim innkeepers, there's the Interim Innkeeper Network that you could go to. You could ask other innkeepers in your community who they use, how do they get away? That was how I initially found my first interim innkeeper, was by talking to a fellow innkeeper and getting someone from them. And that person was fantastic. Over the years, so many times I would have a guest come in and that was maybe from nearby and say, well, this has been a dream of mine to someday own an inn. And that was the code word for me saying, well, would you like to learn how to do it? I could train you, and then you could work for me when I need some time off. And sometimes they took me up on it. And I had 2 fantastic interim innkeepers who I just trained on my own. They lived near enough by, and If I had some emergency where, someone was in the hospital and I need to go, can you come in for breakfast tomorrow? I had that ability up to going on a vacation in a different continent with no cell service available.
So I'm sure you had ended up, especially with room, wine tasting, whatever, and restaurant and all that you evolved into with your place, that you had to have staff, whether it was full-time, part-time, whatever, but not beyond temp, right? What's your advice to innkeepers who are considering either one of those, temporary, part-time, full-time, and how do they get over that fear? Is it all about the systems and the tools and all of that and putting that in place? That then gives them, I guess, a framework to say, okay, just like with, you mentioned Frictionless Guest App and discussions with the guest, you can have discussions with the guest, but of course they could forget anyway. So use the app to remind them what you're recommending. It's kind of the same thing here, right? Like you got to document, you've got to go through this, because how are you going to expect anybody to really pick it up other than just hands-on, which doesn't seem to be the most efficient way. And then as soon as they're not available anymore and you have to bring somebody else in, again, whether it's temporarily, part-time, whatever, you're starting from ground zero again, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So the key is documentation. And it started out small for me. I wrote a going out of town book, and I was going out of town and I was leaving it for my husband. So he knew the general gist of things. I didn't need to tell him where the circuit breakers were, but he needed to know, what my timing was for serving breakfast. What do the tables look like? What's the setup? What gets set on the table first and what gets brought out to the guests? How do you answer the phones? How do you take a reservation? How do you check people in, check people out? So I initially literally wrote a going out of town book. It had my recipes in it. It had what the pictures of the recipes looked like and how you would prepare them and where ingredients were stored so that people could find things. And what were all the emergency contact numbers? If one of the water heaters breaks and there's water flooding through a ceiling, you need to know who to call for this, that, and whatever. So I initially drafted that, and then that would evolve. And then I created a housekeeping manual, because you want a document that teaches your current staff the standard, that documents it, puts it in writing, and then you can use that as a training tool for other staff. And now if I bring somebody in and they're working for me, not just for a day or a weekend, but for a whole week, they have the standard, they have the system. And so if they needed to step in, they could perform those tasks, but they can also put them in a position to oversee those tasks. And even delivering specials and package. If I'm doing a wine and cheese package, what does that look like? How does it get delivered? When does it get delivered? So all of those things, like the idea is to document everything that you do and how you do it. And if there's choices to be made, like this is how I want it and this is why I want it that way. Or maybe there's places where there is more latitude, where you can work within a framework as long as it gets done. So I think by providing that information, you're giving someone the tools to do the job that you do as well as you do it. And there may be differences. So clearly, then it comes to a hiring process. And I think the most important quality when you're hiring someone to be you is I don't need them to do everything exactly right. I need them to have good judgment. I may make a different decision than you, but if you're always looking out for the guest and the guest's best interest, we're going to be on the same page. Like, ooh, I wouldn't have maybe done that, but that's okay. The guest is happy. I'm happy. And I think having that's where it's an emotional release, right? All of these other things are physically preparing to let your baby go. And you maybe went through it to some degree when you had your first babysitter take care of your child. And this is maybe a bigger step. for whatever reason, I would think your child is more valuable. But anyway,
Right. You would hope, but
you would think. And yet I think it's harder for people to let go of the in. And again, it's that emotional leap of faith that everything works out in the end. If it hasn't worked out, it's not the end. It'll be fine. And so as an innkeeper, actually, I wrote an article about how to prepare your inn for an interim innkeeper. And my initial suggestion isn't to hire someone for the first time and then go off to Paris. I mean, that's insane. You both need to feel comfortable with each other. Your interim needs to feel comfortable that they have the ability to get into your head, and you're providing them as much documentation as you can. But the better you get to know them, the better they're going to be able to have that judgment that you're looking for.
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's kind of two parts of this. So there's definitely this idea of processes and documenting them. And then there is that very important reality of who do you hire, whether it's temporarily or not. And in some ways that can be as much of a challenge, I would think, or at least as much of a concern from the innkeeper's perspective, because you can document things greatly, but if you've got somebody that's not going to follow it or just doesn't show that good judgment that is so important, right? Then it doesn't matter. So there's two aspects. Hitting on the first one, the manual and operational kind of side of things, what do you suggest for somebody that's out there who doesn't have the quality of life, the work-life balance, whatever, innkeeper life balance, and realizes that they need to do that? I guess it's like anything else. You just start small. You don't have to say, I've got to create a manual that's, 50 pages. You just have to start making notes and scribbling things down and start to organize your thoughts, and then just kind of incrementally, at least that's one approach, right? Is to do that, unless they want to bring somebody like you. And I guess that's more, either.
How does an ant eat a dinosaur?
Right.
One bite
One
at a
bite
time.
at a time. Right. Yeah. Right.
And so clearly you could start with documenting how you set the tables and take a picture. And then you start documenting like your process for prepping for breakfast, serving breakfast. You can just, again, start documenting your life, or you can hire somebody who does it. I have some templates, so it puts me in a position to kind of do things more quickly because I have my own system where you're not, coming up with a system. But no matter what you do, you just have to take one step at a time, and it gets better every day. Again, if you're going to start small, letting go of the reins. So if the first thing you were going to document was how do you serve breakfast, from setting your tables, preparing it, plating and serving it, clearing it, and then bring someone in, even if it's your spouse or your child, to follow it with you there with them and go through it. And then you're going to see gaps in your documentation, right? If this person can't follow your instructions, then it tells you need to beef that section up somehow. And once you feel comfortable with what you've written, you either, bring somebody else in, or you go out to breakfast that morning and leave it in someone's capable hands. And, just try to take some baby steps, I think to me, it's a good way. If you brought in somebody, a consultant, maybe you can achieve it more quickly. And you can also do it in partnership where somebody assigns you like, hey, fill out this section, take these pictures tomorrow. And so that a lot of how I work with clients is that way, where we work on it together.
Yeah, it does make sense in terms of kind of incrementally going about it, as well as kind of this beta testing concept. You don't go to France for 2 weeks. You maybe do, like a test run with your spouse or whatever, right? And then you move up to the person you think might be a good fit and do a weekend or whatever with you there. And so that's
exactly how I would do it. The other question people ask is like, is this a physical book or is this a digital book? And my answer on that is probably both. And a lot of it because it depends on who your team is and who you are. So the advantage of digital is that anyone can access it anytime. If it's on a G Drive, Google Drive, and it can be something that's easily editable. So I would say that's fundamentally where it should be created. But then having whether it's a single book or whether it's sections of a book. Like breakfast service could be its own book, and that's in your kitchen. And emergency numbers and emergency procedures is in a spot. Housekeeping is stored in the housekeeping closet so that it's in the place you need it, where, when you need it.
Right. It's got to be accessible at the moment that you need it. Yeah, it's like with us, or at least with professional services business, we've got people that are all over the country, basically, right? And so everything's kind of digital. We can use like our own company wiki in order to have things. But even with that, having documents and that sort of thing, you make it so it can be kept up and as centralized as possible. It's different with a bed and breakfast where you've got to have printed stuff, I would think. You just absolutely have to have it. And like you say, in places where it makes sense, right?
Yeah. But so tell me, your Frictionless Guest App, can you print that
Yes.
out for the guests, right? So have you ever had anyone use your app as an operations manual? Because I'm thinking it could totally be done.
Not that I know of, actually.
But if you think of the framework, it's going to have chapters. Like if your staff had
Right.
that on their phone, they could go to it if they need to. You could have all the different sections. You could have breakfast, housekeeping, laundry. You could include photos, just
Right.
like you do. You could have a link to a video that you show that this is how you fold a fitted sheet.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about the human aspect of this then before we maybe wrap up here. Because again, I've certainly been through this. Do you suggest for innkeepers that you do some sort of testing of people, especially if you're going to hire somebody? Because it's amazing how you can talk with somebody through interviews and that sort of thing and think, okay, yeah, this person seems like a nice person. And you find out that they're just, I don't know, there's a service mentality to some people and others not. And it seems to me that some of the online kinds of testing apps that are out there might really help you understand, whether they might be a good fit for a service kind of role, I guess. So,
Yeah. Well, so again, back to Interim Innkeepers Network, the
Mhm.
value of that as a place to start. Again, I would start with your local innkeepers. If you have a friend who has an interim innkeeper, that's right there. It's sort of like when someone recommends my inn to them. If it's a friend, that you're going to follow your friend's advice. So that I think
Right.
is easy. The person works in your area. They're familiar with your area. There's an advantage to that. But the
Right,
second
yeah.
spot that I would go would be Interim Innkeepers Network. And it's sort of like select registry for interims where these people are vetted. For the most part, they all are former innkeepers themselves. So they ran bed and breakfasts. Oftentimes they ran select registry bed and breakfasts. These are folks who are retired, love the lifestyle and like to keep doing it, but just occasionally. They don't want to own a place anymore. And so they tend to work a little bit regionally. So you can see, who works in your state and your area. You can get references from them. So, you can talk to the people that they've worked for. You see if it's a similar size, similar style of service, those sorts of things. And then, of course, I would schedule a video call to sort of be able to see that person face to face. And then, like we talked about, I think that first engagement, if you feel comfortable at that stage, I would just make that first engagement small. And I typically am going to start with, I'm going to pay them to get there either a day or a half day early, the very first time they ever come, so that we can have that overlap and I can spend some time with them. And if you're doing a small staycation, if you meet them in person and you're like, "Oh no," you can cut bait right there. Or you may have that super comfortable feeling and this person's going to be a good fit and, oh, wow, I can finally have a life again. And so I've had so many of those aha moments. And then following an engagement is equally important. How do you hand the reins back to one another? And I would always talk to my staff afterwards. And there was one interim innkeeper who was a perfectly good person. I'd never, ever had a guest complaint about them. I know they took care of the guests, but his approach and my approach, especially with my staff, was not in sync. And I needed therapy for the team after I got home. So he was, so again, it was fine. I knew it was fine, but I wasn't ever going to have that person back again. And so, those are the sorts of things that you should be constantly evaluating. Is it good for the building? Is he good for the staff? Most importantly, is he good for the guests? I could, I've had interim innkeepers who weren't necessarily that great with the tech. By the time, when I got home, I needed to fix a couple of reservations that they had maybe made in the system. But I didn't care because they were so phenomenal with the guests that I was like, whatever, So you kind of decide.
Yeah. And I would think, you probably come back to maybe a kitchen where things aren't exactly in the same place as you expect them to be. But yeah, that's understandable as long as the guests were happy. And I didn't think about, you're right, the staff. If you've got staff, you definitely don't want to have some temporary person come in and terrorize your staff. That's even if they're good with guests, right? I mean,
right. Oh yeah. No, it's important. And so again, a lot of it's that two sides. It's just like you're on a football team and you're practicing every day leading up to the big game. And at that point, all your practice came into play. You were prepared for success. And then it's how do you perform on the field? Right. It's just like that with an interim innkeeper. The coach has to have a leap of faith in the quarterback that you picked to start this game, you've prepared that person for success and they're going to go out and they're going to crush. And so I think that you just have to think of yourself not as an innkeeper, but as maybe the coach, and that you've prepared the team to go out and win that football game.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love a good analogy, don't you?
I know. And always a sports analogy, of course, or like Matt and I do some kind of a music analogy. But yeah, it's like stage fright or whatever. As long as you're prepared and you're going to go up and crush it, you'll be all right once you get in it.
And what are you going to do if the lead vocalist gets laryngitis? If you better have those songs written down, and somebody, the drummer better be able to step up.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Or have a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. Or have somebody fill in. What was that? Was it Guns N' Roses? I can't remember what happened, but didn't Axl Rose sing for AC/DC?
That's correct. Yeah,
at the end, this is a good analogy.
Yeah,
we are rolling with this one because at the end, they're not going to sound exactly the same, right? It's going to sound a little bit different with this other musician singing, but it's still going to be good. And
the crowd going to be happy?
Is still going to love it. And that's what you're aiming for. But you have to be prepared. Somebody better be practicing their vocals and learning the words. And that way they could step in. That's what we're talking about.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's cool. Good deal. All right. Well, Matt, I was thinking there were probably some things I should have learned, instead of having going all in on Matt with the podcasting, maybe I should have given him we should have tried a trial run with the podcasting, and then, but it's turned out all right. I mean, yeah.
I know. Well, I think this one might be number 80 or 81 at this point, Steve. So yeah.
Too late, man. I can't turn back.
I survived the trial run. Yeah.
Exactly. So
yeah, that's hilarious.
All right, well, do your thing, Matt. We're coming to the end here.
All right, good deal. Rebecca, before I take us out, is there anything else to add or anything we may have missed?
No, I just had so much fun, and I hope you guys will find a reason to bring me back again.
We can always find a reason. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Great. Okay, I'll take us out then. So this concludes this Frictionless Innkeeper podcast interview with Rebecca Gallagher, who's the founder of Hozperity, which focuses on operational areas of running an independent lodging property, really focused on offering systems and advice to simplify operations, improve profitability, and bring balance to their clients' lives so they can enjoy their financial and personal prosperity. Hozperity. Love the name. That's awesome. And our podcast is brought to you by the Frictionless Guest App, the digital concierge that helps your guests to live like locals. Learn how at frictionlessguest.com. Once again, that's frictionlessguest.com. And Rebecca and Steve, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate the time. Take care.